Hello, and welcome back to Pinstripe Pulse. The season is 1 week away. We are previewing our roster. We're going to start with starting pitching, catching, infield, outfield, all of it. Look at it.
We are in the thick of it.
Welcome back to Pinstripe Pulse. My name is Liam. I'm joined, as per usual, by Jake. Jake, how's it going, dude?
Not too shabby. We were out in Austin, Texas last weekend, and while I was there, I somehow picked up quite the gnarly upper respiratory infection on Friday, and was struggling through. Managed to play both games though, Saturday and Sunday, but it's been a quite the internal battle trying to knock that out of my system. But I'm kind of getting back to equilibrium right now, so feeling pretty good. How about you?
You think if you weren't sick, your wall scrapers would have found the seats?
I think that extra vitamin C might have done the job. That was rough, man. I hit three balls on the screws essentially, and they just did not find the top of the wall. It was a struggle all week. I'm gonna blame my power surge on my little that has to be it.
We got to find you a launch angle expert, just to get a few of those out, because I know I kind of hit a long pop up that kind of stumbled into a homer with those fences, but wasn't quite barreling the ball as well as you were. But hey, that's kind of how it goes sometimes.
Loud contact every time I'll take it, but it's really demoralizing when you have to stop at first base for a wall ball. And the wall is feet away.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, we had a good time in Austin. We were playing some ball down there. Really cool facility they have set up over at the Long Time, just outside of Austin, Texas. I don't know if it's in Austin proper or in the suburbs, but we're there for South by Southwest. So we had a few bands that were playing throughout the day. 100, 200 people, at 300 people even at times coming through, watching us play some amateur baseball. So my coworkers were asking me if I was like, oh, is Liam professional or is he like semi-professional? And I'm like, no, we're out playing ball. I can show you a picture of me drinking on the mound for game 2.
The beer can was right behind the bump.
It was great. Got a good selfie too. I'm very much for Sandlot. I'm very much a phone in the pocket, taking in the moment. I'm taking pictures on the field. I don't know how much in the moment that is, but got some good pictures out there. So it was a fun time. Feeling good now. Still kind of feeling it. I went not crazy, but was going out Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Went on a few escapades with Greg. Um, which was a good time. So my Monday morning flight was not fun. But here we are. It's a Friday record day, and we're 1 week out from Yankees opening day. Excited to have a terrible day next Friday because I'm going to the stadium, Jake and I, for opening day next Thursday.
Oh,
Excited for that.
dude, I completely forgot. That's so close. Like that one thing to see that like games start that day, but like to remember that you're actually going, it's like, oh, I got to prepare my week for that. I'm really excited, man. Like this, we're gonna get, I think, vintage Garrett Cole. He's looked great so far this spring. And we're really at the point where we can actually start judging players based on their performance of spring. Like early on, I mentioned, back in early March, late February, it's kind of worthless trying to gauge a player's performance at that point, just because they're really trying to get a feel for everything they're working with. But I think Garrett Cole at this point has a damn good idea of what his arsenal is going to look like. And we should really see the lineup take shape within the next week or so.
Yeah, and like Jake said, here's where you can really start evaluating players. I mean, in terms of all the players that are in consideration for the Yankees roster, like that's who's there now. And the same goes for all the other teams. Your last week in camp, that's who is MLB level talent, even if they're in AAA or AA, wherever they end up to start the year. All of these guys, how they look in at bats, maybe not necessarily stats because of the small sample size, but you can see how they look, what they're working on, getting ramped up for the season. And I think that segues us well into our starting pitching conversation. So we're going to go through our starting pitching positional preview first out here. And we've outlined it if you listen to our bullpen positional preview. basically we have 7 options that we're working with right now. 2 of whom are going to start the season hurt. So we're going to go through our 5-man rotation within the first few weeks of April, as well as 2 significant arms that are down and talk about their impact. But I think the first starting pitcher for us to talk about, you mentioned a little bit, who's going to be getting the pill on opening day, who's been a reliable arm for us and in baseball for the last few years, is Garrett Cole. Uh, Cole through today, how do you like how he looked and how are you feeling about Garrett this spring?
I mean, his stuff looked great. I want to say that he might have made 1 mistake or 2 mistakes, if that. I think he hung a ball middle that got hammered to left center for a double earlier on in the game. But besides that, his stuff was pinpoint. His command was there. He was not getting behind in counts. He was striking out people as you would expect. And I think most importantly, the velo is up high 90s again. So I think that's the main thing you got to look out for with him. So everything looks like it's in place for him to have a really solid start to the season. I think it's just a matter of if he can keep the ball in the park is always kind of the biggest question when it comes to Garrett Cole in a Yankees uniform. It seems like he's bit by the long ball because he challenges guys up in the zone, which is bound to happen. But at the same time, that's what's hurt him the most. And that's what hurt the Yankees the most whenever he was on the mound. He's going to give you 200 innings in a season and give you probably 250 plus strikeouts, which is amazing. And that's kind of what you ask for out of your ace, right? But at this point, I think we want to see a few less home runs leave the park. And but besides that, I'm very excited to see him on opening day and for the start of the season just in general.
Yeah, with Cole, you kind of know what you're going to get. And ultimately, I think in Yankees fandom, a lot of people get down on Cole at times. He is prone to giving up a homer. Um, Sometimes that ball, when he's off, can look super flat, even though it's still being thrown at 101 miles an hour with some crazy spin rate stuff coming up. Good luck if you stand in the box and try to hit Garrett Cole down the middle. We saw Shohei Ohtani attack Mike Trout the other day with a fastball down the middle. It's not so easy. But Garrett Cole is about as reliable of an arm as you can get. We had this conversation earlier in the winter with J Ray, who jumped on. Where do you see Garrett Cole in terms of the scope of the whole league? Is he a top 5 pitcher? I would argue wholeheartedly that he is, even though on a given year he might be the 5th, 6th best pitcher in the game or even in the league. Last year he finished 9th in the AL Cy Young voting. But you look at his numbers, he had a down year, 3.47 FIP. His ERA, what did it end up being?
I
Why
want to
can't
say
I find ERA on
3.54 or
Fangraphs?
something like that.
3.54.
Around
Yeah.
3.5. Yeah.
Um, but looking at the scale strictly of what he gives you, 200 innings, led the AL in 257 strikeouts, was an all-star. That was a down year for him. Going to the Baseball Reference projections, or I can also give the Fangraphs projections as well. Baseball Reference projects him at 179 innings, 215 strikeouts already just at that. That's with a 77% reliability. You take that, that's the Cy Young frontrunner. Just there alone. Looking at Fangraphs projections, they have him at 199 innings, 3.02 ERA, and a 4.5 WAR. So that's going like these projections are based off of all of his data with 90% confidence what they think his median value should be.
And how many other pitchers
Garrett
are
Cole is
going
going to
to
be.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say how many other pitchers is going to give you 200 innings too, and like not just give you 200, but be projected to give you 200 innings. That kind of goes to show how
Exactly.
highly,
And
yeah, that just goes to show how highly all of these different companies, Fangraphs, Steamer, all of them think about how durable Garrett Cole is, and that's huge.
yeah, and you look at the top arms of the past few years, Corbin Burns had a great year, Justin Verlander, Sandy Alcantara, these guys at the top, and Dylan Cease. You haven't seen them do it back-to-back years. Even Carlos Rodon, who we just signed, is one of the most repeatable pitchers of the last, what,
Few
only 2
years.
seasons, 3 seasons,
Yeah.
going off of that sample size. So, like, Garrett Cole is a comfortable number 1. He's going to be the best pitcher in the AL East, most likely. He's going to be up there, top 5 in the American League. I love seeing him throw. He's going to stumble into a few homers. It's really interesting you go to the Fangraphs projections, they have him locked in for 26 homers of the 69 earned runs they think he's going to give up. That's over 35% of the total runs he gives up coming off of home runs alone. And
Yeah.
that's just from the runner scoring, let alone 2-run homers, 3-run homers. In the past, last year, 33 homers. That's where we really felt it. The difference between really a decent number 1 year and a Cy Young contending year like 2021 was 10 home runs. He gave up 24 home runs in 2021. So that's where we can see the difference, in his Cy Young year, where he should have won the Cy Young, in my opinion, in 2019. He was dominant, didn't lose a game from July on. He still gave up 29 homers. So it's something that's going to come with the territory of Cole. It's just a matter of how many runners does he get on base. He doesn't walk very many guys, strikes out a ton, gets the double play when he needs to. It's really a matter of limiting those base runners before that potential comes up to the plate.
Yeah, I mean, if he's given up 1-run homers and solo shots in the freaking 7th inning and it's already 7-3 Yankees or 7-1, whatever it may be, then I don't really care too much. It's just about like limiting the traffic beforehand, like you said. And looking at his Fangraphs, this is or not Fangraphs, sorry, Baseball Savant. He's 92nd percentile in K rate, which means he's striking out at a whole lot of people. Fastball velocity 93rd percent. Barrel rate is bottom 15th percent, and then exit velo is bottom 25th. So if he's, I mean, it's basic physics at this point. If the ball is connected with that kind of velo, it's going to go very far. So that's the homers are inevitable, but like you said, and we're in both in agreement on this, he just needs to keep guys off the bags, and a lot of that's going to come down to the defense as well. If the Yankees can provide good defense in the infield, a lot of those runs that will be scoring that aren't necessarily like unearned runs are just going to be a non-factor. And I think we should expect plenty of that from him this year. So we'll get into, the semantics of the middle infield and the outfield later on, but I think that's going to play a big factor for him. And when it comes to pitching alone, he's got what it takes to have another Cy Young caliber year, and I don't see any kind of regression just yet.
Yeah, and even look at game 1 last year of ALDS, the type of game that he had. 6 innings. Steven Kwan clips him for a solo shot. And then he just missing barrels, a lot of strikeouts, getting through a really good contact hitting lineup. And sometimes they're just going to stumble into one. So I'm a huge fan of Cole. I'm wearing a Cole jersey right now, actually. I just realized. So I'm excited for him this year. I think this could be a Cy Young year for him. Not a lot of years left in his prime. Yankees are really in win mode. He has more pitching support behind him. I think he can really kind of go for it. And he's always going to go for it. He's going to give that scale. And the Yankees are thin right now, starting pitching wise. So we kind of need him innings early, and even down the stretch. We don't have many 7, 8 starting pitcher caliber guys to come in and fill in the rotation. We're going to need Cole to give us length to alleviate our bullpen, because we also don't have a long man when our long men are in the rotation themselves.
Yep. And I think that we both agree that when it comes to Cole's performance and maybe the way that he makes adjustments this year, I think bringing in a guy like Rodon is going to be significant for him, just because those guys will feed off of each other. And it's a similar kind of arm that's a power arm. Rodon has similar velo when he's on top of his game. However, he's really good at keeping the ball in the park. So maybe he learns a thing or two from Rodon, and maybe Rodon learns a thing or two from Cole. And I think that dynamic can be very significant for both of them moving forward.
Yeah, and let's get into Rodon, because he's penciled in as our number 2, who we expect the whole year to be pitching, pretty much except for these next few weeks. The report is that Rodon had forearm discomfort. We always kind of panic when we look at that kind of injury report, because that's generally the precursor to greater issues with the UCL, potential Tommy John surgery situation. Rodon has come out. The Yankees have come out. Jack Curry just had a report today saying that it's not a big deal. Rodon, Matt Blake said that Rodon looked really good in a bullpen today. He'll be throwing as early May. So we're going to see him out for about a month of the beginning of the season, and then hopefully he's ready to go. Rodon is that premier signing, really, of the offseason. Obviously, Judge is the big technical free agent signing, but he's retaining a homegrown player. The Yankees kind of lost on a gamble with Judge not giving him the money he was looking for. But Rodon really is that premier signing. Jake, you alluded to it. He's exceptional at keeping the ball in the park. Now, the benefit the last 2 seasons, he pitched for the White Sox and he pitched for the Giants, both who play in famously pitcher favoring ballparks, especially the latter of the Giants. But 13 home runs given up in 2021, 12 homers given up in 2022. Both of those all-star season top 5 Cy Young finishes, seemingly out of nowhere. You know, this guy goes from having an ERA plus from 2015 through 2020 of 100 or below. 2021, he has an ERA plus of 185, and 22 an ERA plus of 140. He led MLB in FIP last year. The Giants were a notoriously terrible defense, even though he was in a pitcher's park. So they say that he had a better projected ERA even than Sandy Alcantara, who ended up winning the Cy Young Award. And now the Yankees have him in a ballpark that's interesting for his type of pitcher. What do you think about Rodon's injury? How do you feel about him this season?
So just to preface one thing real quick, I was thinking about the whole pitcher-friendly ballpark thing. A pitcher-friendly ballpark is pitcher-friendly if you have a good defense behind you, but if you have a bad one that bobbles the ball all around the little external parts of the third base and first baseline where there's all that extra room, that could add to a lot of unwarranted runs, essentially. So I am not that concerned about that aspect at all. I think you don't really have that in Yankee Stadium other than maybe a little bit of left field, but I'm hopeful on that end. That being said, I love Rodon. I've been a big fan of him. I wanted him all offseason, and I'm ecstatic that we finally got him. He's the type of bulldog pitcher that we've needed this entire time, and I'm really not concerned about this forearm injury just because of the way that he spoke about it. He said that he's had this before. He had it all last season. And the cadence of his voice when he was explaining this earlier in the offseason when they decided to shut him down in like the beginning of spring training was very much like, I could easily pitch through this. I just don't want to do that. There's no reason to risk it right now. There's no structural damage. This is something that I can work through. But once again, why should I be working through it if I can simply work on it, shut down for a little bit, and then come back stronger than ever? And that sounds like the spot we're currently at right now. Not only did Matt Blake say that he looked really good in his most recent bullpen session, which was, I think, earlier today or yesterday, but he said it was the best they've seen him as a Yankee. And if that's the case, that might be him returning to form of mid-season, early last season as well, 2022, when he was pumping high 90s. So if we look at his Baseball Savant page, we're talking about whiff rate of 86%. Is that top 86 percentile? Whereas the difference between him and Cole, I mean, he's got the same K rate, 95%. But when you get down to the, barrel rate, he's still top 66%. So even though he's throwing that high velo with the high spin and all that, he's missing the barrels, which is huge. And I think a lot of that is credited to him making a conscious decision in 2021, the start of the 2021 season, to completely rescope and rechange the way that he throws the baseball and his mechanics. He realized, the reason I'm getting hurt is because I'm not that efficient with my body. If I can learn to, generate more torque and action with my lower half, then that's going to take a little bit more pressure off my upper half. And ever since that point, it was almost immediate results. And I think that talent potential was always there, but he just finally tapped into it in 2021. And as a younger pitcher, he's still just turned 30. He's got plenty of good years in front of him. So I'm really excited of what he's going to bring to the table. We're looking at probably another 250 plus strikeout guy, assuming he's able to stay, healthy for 180 innings. Even 170, I'll take, gladly.
Yeah, and in terms of looking at Rodon's career, you see a lot of years that are pretty mid, for lack of a better term, very league average. You might think, why did Rodon not get the deal that he wanted after 2021, but he got it after 2022? and you look at all of the residual advanced statistics, Rodon had a very repeatable 2022 season. It was very much reflective of his great 2021 season, in which he was the Cy Young frontrunner until getting hurt down the line. He only threw about 135 innings. Last year, he threw about 170. And like you said, I would take that in a heartbeat. That's more than most pitchers throw. Corbin Burns won the Cy Young on fewer innings 2 years ago. His every residual statistic from K rate, jumped up 37%, like you said, in that top 10 percentile in MLB back-to-back years. His pitch mix, his fastball, 2021, 59%, 2022, 61%. Pretty significantly different from the previous years. It jumped up about 10%. His slider using right around 30% back-to-back years, waning out his changeup. He's really a two-pitch pitcher, really going for a bit more of a curveball approach, taking away from his changeup. All of the batted ball statistics, like right in line from last year. It's eerily similar. You don't see a lot of pitchers have these back-to-back years. So if you're looking at Rodon's history and thinking, oh, this could be 2 fluke years, it could be situational stuff, I think, like to what Jake said, he really changed his approach in his mechanics, in his pitch mix, how he approaches the game, and he's given back-to-back pretty repeatable seasons. So I'd be more in line to see him with what he did in 2021 and 22 as opposed to 2020 or earlier. And I'm really excited for him. I could see him. We talked about his pitch mix. We talked about his approach to hitters. His attitude is just really conducive to New York, and I know that's a basic talking point, very simple to say, but in terms of a team that needs fire from the starting rotation, we have some fun with Nestor. We have professionalism with Cole. I think Rodon is a real winner, and he's someone who craves winning. That's why he came to the Yankees. He's had a really good approach with the media. He had no problem with shaving his beard. He looks really good with the mustache that he has going. I'm very excited to see him come through as a number 2 pitcher. Even if Cole is off his game, to have Rodon coming behind him, that's some backup pitching that we haven't had in a while.
He's gonna shove, and it's gonna be awesome, and everyone's gonna like it. That's all I gotta say about him.
All right, and next up in the staff, we can go between 2 options here, but I think number 3 in terms of potential, and who's been our number 1 in the past, is going to be Luis Severino. Sevy has also had his fair share of injury stuff in the last year. Really gave us a full, somewhat season last year. He ended up on the 60-day diet IL towards the middle of the season, which he was not happy about. Gave us 102 innings. How do you feel about Sevy's spring so far? That high ERA, and some of his outings haven't looked too great, but
so the ERA is not ideal, as some would say, but like honestly, the velo's there, and that's the most important thing with him in terms of what I'm looking for in spring training. Just to make sure he doesn't have arm stuff going on. He was pumping 98, 99, 100 a few times even this spring training, which is obviously what you want to see out of him. Having 3 guys that can pump that at the top of your rotation or throughout your rotation is, I think, a little bit important in the current state of baseball. But this dude has the tenacity to come back, and I think this is the year that he comes fully back to form, because I was happy with what he gave us last season in the innings that he gave us as well. His injury stint was, I believe, was it the hamstring or the groin? So it wasn't a shoulder injury or an elbow injury, which I think was the biggest thing I was looking out for. And it does sound like they held him down in the IL for a little bit longer than he wanted to be down there. So I'm assuming that he was healthier way earlier on, but they wanted him saved and ready to go fresh for the postseason and down the stretch in September when they really needed him. So I am not mad about the way that he ended his season whatsoever. I am a little bit concerned that he hasn't fully found the feel for that slider yet, but I think I want to say his last televised start that he had, he really did find it towards the end of the start. He struck out 2 or 3 guys straight with it. And it had the proper vertical yet horizontal depth that you want to see out of his arm slot. So everything was breaking a lot tighter, and he just looked a lot sharper than he did early on, which is what you would expect out of a pitcher coming back from not only TJ, but also coming back in spring training, who's getting a feel for all of his secondary stuff. So if we look at his baseball savant page, he's not that great with the exit velo, a lot like Garrett Cole. I think they profile very similar as pitchers in general. But his K rate is 78%, and his expected slugging is top 83%, and fastball velocity is top 80%. So there's a lot there that you can really hang your hat on and be like, this is the guy that's going to propel himself to the top of the rotation this year. And also he's looking for a big contract, a big payday at the end of the season. So that's where I'm kind of standing with him. I think he's another, if he can give us 150 to 160 innings, you're looking at 175 to 200 strikeouts and maybe like a low 3, high 2 ERA, which I think everyone that's a Yankees fan would bank for that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm high on Sevy. If you like putting on long odds bets,
Yeah.
Sevy probably has really good odds to win the Cy Young or to finish top 3 in a Cy Young, or even like be an all-star. I know that that's a little bit different of a criteria, but look at Sevy in 2017 and 2018. He was the bona fide number 1 for the Yankees. He put up 190 innings those years, finished 3rd in Cy Young and 9th in Cy Young, respectively. And he's had a few injuries. Like he'd had a barely pitched in 2019. He did not pitch in 2020. He barely pitched in 2021. Last year he came back and he threw 102 innings. And I was trying to compare, what is Sevy doing in 2017 and 2018 versus 2022? Looking at his K per 9, right in line, right around 10 K per 9. Very similar seasons. His K rate, right around 28% K rate. I was looking through and I was like, what made last year feel a little bit different than the Sevy of old? Because some people think that, we've lost that Sevy completely. His velo is a little bit down, but I think it's there. And the big thing, like you said, Jake, the most significant difference in all of his StatCast numbers and his batted ball data that I saw, his hard hit percentage in 2022 was 41.3%, which is very high for a starter. And that's about 10% up from 2017 and 2018 when you have those full sample sizes to compare when he was an all-star level pitcher. But if you look at everything else, his barrel percentage is about the same as his average, and max exit velo is about the same. It's just that a higher percentage of his pitches are catching the zone and being hit really hard. Just a little bit more. And like you said, he factors out similar to Cole. Sevy will see more likely than giving up just big homers to like have a few strings of doubles, or I think he kind of just loses the zone, or not that he loses the zone. He unfortunately finds the zone, loses his spots sometimes. I think Severino, now he's had a full year. They've been really careful with his injury. They did not allow him to go to the WBC, which is unfortunate for him. Good for us, in my opinion, just to let him rehab. I could see Sevy has the potential to be a number 1 on a lot of MLB teams. Even has the potential to be number 1 on a Yankees team if Cole and Rodon have down years. That's how good he is, and I'm excited for him this year.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that if he was on another organization right now, he would be the ace. Like that's just the type of arm he is, and that's just the type of personality he is. He is very much an alpha dog. And one thing I do really want to see more out of him this year is maybe like one thing that always has impressed me about Garrett Cole is that there's 100 in the chamber at any given time, 101 maybe, that he can give out, in the 7th inning with runners on 1st and 3rd, and it's a close game and there's 2 outs. And that's one thing with Sevy is sometimes it seems like he fizzles out with a velo later in games and he doesn't always get to that later point. I feel like the way that he's advanced his pitching arsenal by learning these secondary pitches, he now throws that cutter, which is looking pretty solid. I don't love it just yet for him, but it is a new tool that he's incorporating in, which I think will play well off of his changeup, which has gotten drastically improved. And then also his fastball, which has obviously been pretty elite for most of his career. I think that he has the pitch mix now to like know how to manage his velo a little bit better. So that way he's pitching a little bit more towards weak contact and missing barrels earlier in the game. And then he can rear back and get 100 without blowing his arm out in the 7th inning, 8th inning. And that will benefit him and the Yankees a lot in playoff time. Because that's where I think, all want to see him perform the best is when he's in game 4 or game 3 of a DS or a CS, because that's what we've kind of been missing. Like he'll have decent playoff performances, but we haven't seen that ace outing, which Garrett Cole gave us last year, which a lot of other pitchers have given us in the past. It's like we just need to see that extra oomph where he's, given us a little bit like the 110 pitch performance through 7 or 8 innings. And he's saying, this is my mound. I'm not getting off of it. So that's where I'm at with Sevy. I really like him, and I really think that he's got a lot going for him, and it's just a matter of honing into all of his tools.
Nothing excites me more than the prospect of a healthy Sevy going into an away playoff game 3 after 2 games at Yankee Stadium, backed by Cole and Rodon, and having Luis Severino on the road. His demeanor is different when Sevy's on and he's healthy, and there's nothing excites me more, especially if he can be backed up in game 4 by Nestor Cortez, who I think is our next guy to go into. And Nestor, obviously, he's a Yankees cult hero. Even if he doesn't perform well this year or anything happens, these last 2 seasons have been absolutely extraordinary from someone who was DFA'd by the Orioles, Yankees, and Mariners in the previous 3 seasons multiple times, who had a negative 1.5 WAR before being the Yankees swingman in 2021 and putting together a really solid 160 inning season. Got some Cy Young votes last year. Thanks Brian Hoke and a few other voters who saw him, but I don't think those were crazy unjustified. I mean, he had a 2.24 ERA, an xERA of 2.7, accumulated a 3.5 WAR as a starting pitcher in just 160 innings. And this is a guy who's right now, if everyone's healthy, which they're not naturally, is slotted in as our number 4, maybe our number 3, but has been a reliable arm for us in big spots over the last year. How do you feel about Nestor going into this year?
Well, first of all, have you ever looked at his baseball savant page, all the red that's on there? It's fun. It's like a lot of fun. I mean, despite only throwing 91 to 93, sometimes he'll top out at 94, 95 if he's feeling really good. He's kind of elite in almost everything. Like his expected batting average is top 85th percentile. Fastball velocity is obviously lower 10th, but like barrel rate, top 81. Expected slugging, top 86. Fastball spin, that's what he kind of relies on as his bread and butter, beyond just his varying release points. It's top 67%. This is a dude who knows how to use spin rate to his advantage to make the ball deceive the batter in a way that it's looking like it's 99 to 100 right at the eyes when it's really 93, 94 right at the eyes. But then he has 3-4 other pitches that he can throw off of that, as well as different arm slots. This is a guy who fully knows his body. He's probably the most self-aware pitcher that I've ever seen on a mound. The way that he's able to balance, like you've been on a mound before. It's very difficult to hold those types of positions as long as he does. And it's not going to affect him with the new rules. Like that's the kind of crazy thing about it is he's like all of the moves that he makes are legal. So he's going to be able to deceive batters as much as he wants to. I'm really excited. I think that we might see a little bit of regression with the ERA, and that's completely okay if he's like still like I think that 2.8 to 3.2, 3.3 is like completely valid, in terms of something that we can see, and it's still something to be excited about. But the fact that he gave us 160 innings last season was huge. And if he's anywhere around that, that's a massive win, because that means not only he's healthy, but likely the other pitchers stay healthy as well. Like if you have him as a number 4 or a 5, that's an insane line. That's an insane rotation to work with. Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, and Nestor going into last year was someone who we had concerns with. How many innings can you give him? Because he came from being a reliever and he hadn't had a full MLB season of starting pitching. We got to the end of last year, he threw 160 innings with tiny bits of injuries, like 15-day IL for pitcher here and there. Still got that's a full season as a starting pitcher. Pitched game 5 of the ALDS on short rest and gave 5 innings when people thought he'd give 3. You expect Nestor to be this crafty, low velo guy. And he's really not that. Like relative to the new age of baseball, sure, he sits 95, 94, 95 on the fastball. And like you said on his baseball savant page, those metrics that are in red are results metrics. Like he's not going to sit in the top 10 in fastball velocity or in RPM necessarily, but he does have highly efficient spin for his speed. He's missing barrels. He gives up less than a homer per 9 innings, which is elite at the starting pitcher level. Especially from someone who you think might have a loopy curveball or a fastball that just kind of sits there. It's really not the case with Nestor. He delivers. He's gonna give some scale, and if this year that becomes 130 innings, that becomes a 3.3 ERA. Um, I think that's a natural regression that it's okay if we see, but he's not going to fall off a cliff because similar to Rodon, he's put together back-to-back years of being really reliable with his stuff and something that hitters can't figure out. Like the tape is out on him, and Nestor is a bona fide stud, really.
So this is the line that Baseball Reference projects for him, which keep in mind they're always pretty conservative with their projections. 8-5 record. I don't really care about that. 3.02 ERA, 143 innings pitched, 146 strikeouts, so more than 9 Ks per 9. 1.063 WHIP, that's amazing considering like he was a 0.9 last season. They don't really see that much regression, so that I think that they're very onto something right there. You have to respect the tools
that
he's
with 70% confidence too, which
with
is very
70%
high.
confidence, and he's already in the top 72% of strikeout rate in the entire league. So this is a guy that's I think only going to strike out more people this season than he ever has before in his career because he's 28 years old at this point. He's not an old dude who's got just crafty lefty stuff going on. He is a younger guy that's only going to learn more as he stays on the mound. And he's also just a clubhouse personality that I think is going to invigorate this team to perform better and better every time he's out there.
Yeah, totally. And I'm excited for Nestor. And if everyone's healthy, he's our number 4, and he's the best number 4 in MLB, and it's not close. With Rodon down, he's our number 3 or our number 2, and he's amongst the top in both of those categories. So we're in a pretty good spot at the top end of our rotation. But I think the problem starts when we go to the bottom end of our rotation. And where I'm going to start with is the guy who we don't even know if he's going to pitch this year, acquired in a trade from last year. It's Frankie Montas. Montas is likely going to start the year on the 60-day IL, so he won't take up a 40-man roster spot, which maybe that's a silver lining, could make some space for Anthony Volpe, who we'll talk about later. Montas had a really tough end of the season with the Yankees. It was not a fun time. He ended the season overall. His stats didn't look too bad with 4.05 ERA. But I'm trying to find his splits on. Here we go. He had a 6.35 ERA with the Yankees, who granted it was a FIP of 5, but that's still not great. You're not putting yourself in a position to win. But his injury seems like it's going to be a while. I mean, what have you heard from camp in terms of Montas's injury and his potential impact?
I know he said that he's really looking to pitch again this season. There hasn't been that much that's come out about him that makes me hopeful that he's going to pitch this season. But like if we do get him back by September, I consider that a win because at least you're getting maybe some kind of value for him. But at this point, the trade has been lost. The damage is done in terms of what we gave up in our pitching prospect capital. Ken Waldichuk and other lefty that came through.
JP Sears.
JP Sears, both of them are already providing for the A's. So we could have had one of them fill in for a 5th spot. So that's just a brutal trade all in all. But I mean, if we can get him kind of being like 85% of what we saw from him in the first half of the season last year for the A's, in September, that could be reminiscent of an acquisition like Harrison Bader coming up for us in late September and providing that spark plug. I don't have that much faith in him to do so, but he does have a decent track record, and he, the 4.05 ERA does not look great, but he was elite at the beginning of the season. And I don't know, it's a tough case because like there is some really cool stuff there when it comes to his pitch mix. I like his splitter a lot. His fastball, when he's feeling good, can top out at 97, 98. So that's once again another guy that has, if you're talking about just the pitching tools alone, ace-like stuff. But if he's continued to be, I mean, shoulder surgeries do take a while to come back from. So I can't say that I'm locked in with him even providing for this team at all. But I'd say if we get anything out of him, it means that the Yankees see that he is like really healthy and kind of pitching back to his normal self come September. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's out for the year. And part of why I think he's out for the year is the rumor was when the Yankees traded for him, he was not 100%, and he said that himself as well. If you look at some of the results data, a lot of the stuff is the same, but his strikeouts went down and his walks went up last year. That's generally emblematic of an injury to the point where his strikeout to walk ratio halved between his time with Oakland and his time with the Yankees, and went from 4 strikeouts for every walk to just over 2 strikeouts for every walk. Had a much higher home run rate, even though it was a smaller sample size. It was significant enough to see that there was an issue with him. And I think we're looking at a timeline for his injury. Maybe he gets back by July or so to a major league field. If we're looking at the same timeline as last year, he gave a really bad 2 months coming off of an injury. Um, I don't see that being constructive for the Yankees, but it depends on how dire our needs are. Because I think, Montas not being in the rotation brings us into our next options, which I think we can talk about them kind of together. That being Clark Schmidt and Domingo Germán,
Yeah.
who were both very interesting characters in Yankees land. Um, who do you think, if we have Rodon back in, who's our number 5 between those two right now?
Honestly, right now it's tough because I mean we just haven't seen Clark start that much. Like I want to say Schmidt, and I feel like the Yankees want it to be Schmidt, and he's looked good in spring training so far. He strikes out a lot of guys. I think he had like 5 through 2 innings last time he was out. Um, I think he's got the stuff to be a starter, and he pitched really well last season, but most of that was in the bullpen. Um, I feel like unfortunately at the moment, like I don't love this guy, but like Domingo Germán is at least a proven starter. His stuff isn't going to overwhelm you. We all know about the off the field issues that he's had. It seems like the Yankees are well past that at this point, so it is what it is. He's on this team as of right now. Maybe he gets traded. Maybe one of them gets traded at some point. But in order for that to happen, we're going to need Rodon fully back. Um, I don't know, man. It's a tough spot. I think that as if you had a gun to my head right now, and we're talking at this very moment, I think that it's Germán. But if Schmidt comes out and has a really good first month, I think it's Schmidt. I think they really just want it to be the homegrown talent that they produced on their own. So that would be Clark.
Yeah, I think Clark has a potentially a bit higher ceiling. But over time, where we thought that ceiling was much higher, I don't think it's that much higher than Domingo. And I think the floor is significantly lower, which is why I agree with you. Domingo just having that 2019 season really helps his case. Like, a proven starter. We don't love Domingo, but he was able to go 150 innings. Even in 2021, how many did he go? He had 100 innings in 2021. Last year, not quite as many because he had injury and suspension. I think he had suspension he was serving as well
Midway through.
last year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So I think Domingo is that number 5. I would love for this to be a legitimate problem, putting Clark in the bullpen. I think Domingo is less likely to be a swingman, whereas Clark can be a long man and a starter, go back and forth.
Yeah.
Clark also has options, I believe. So Domingo's gonna be that guy. If we're going 5-man and Rodon is back, then Germán's gonna get it. But inevitably there will be some sort of injury, in my opinion. But I think Clark has shown enough that it's not remarkable from Clark. The stuff was projected to be really something else, like curveball and even fastball zip. It's still projected to be pretty good, but not at like that elite level that separates him from the rest of like those top minor league prospects. So I think generally we go Domingo.
Yeah. I mean, it just kind of is what it is at that point with those two guys. I think Clark is one of those guys that could, at any given night. I mean, you can say the same thing about Domingo. It's like he could get shelled one day and the next day throw a no hitter. Just because of the kind of stuff that they have. And I don't mean that as like a testament to how good their stuff is. It's just like I think both of them can frustrate hitters quite a bit because they'll put bat on ball to an extent. Like they're not going to be the overpowering type. So like you'll see a lot of contact fly balls and stuff like that, and like soft ground outs. So I could just see for whatever reason, like either of those guys throw a no hitter one night and then just give up 7 runs in 2 innings the next. I don't know how to feel about that, but
Who's that?
that's just
The
kind of like,
Reed Detmers? Was that the guy who threw the
yeah,
no
yeah.
hitter
That's the
last
one
year?
in his first appearance.
Got sent down about a month later.
Baseball is a cruel sport.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing that I guess also be excited about Clark Schmidt is his fastball spin is 93% top 93 percentile. So he knows how to spin that thing a lot like Nestor. Um, yeah, I don't really know how to grade that one out. It's not it doesn't get fun when you have to talk about those two guys as being like the 5th spot in the rotation. It was fun when you had a healthy Frankie Montas in your mind. Just because he's a proven number 2, number 1 at the major league level already. And either way, you're getting a downgrade with either of these guys being that guy, at the end of the year. Like I would like to see, don't get me wrong, if Clark Schmidt ends up throwing 150 innings, that probably means something went right with him. That probably means that he lived up to the value that the Yankees kind of held him to for a long time. And it kind of validates every opportunity they had to trade him. Like, okay, now this guy is here. And, it feels good to have a homegrown guy coming out of that rotation.
Clark Schmidt has one minor league option. I think that's going to be used exactly on June 7th, and then he's going to come back on August 3rd. I'm going to bet those exact dates. And he'll go down for a little bit. Fangraphs has him projected at 103 innings, which basically tells you at least half of the year as a starter, and then some relief innings as well. And Domingo Germán at about 120 innings. So I think, that's looking at the Rodon injury, looking both of them are going to get a decent amount of run. Both of them could get hurt as well. I mean, Domingo's curveball rates out pretty well. He hasn't had a ton of innings. Yeah, and if you can't tell, we're a little bit apathetic about this because I think when you go past number 7, which is really where we're at now, even though they're in our 5-man rotation to start the year, there's not really any options.
Yeah.
Any significant options. I mean, everyone else who is in consideration, this is a week before opening day, they've all been sent down. We're looking at like Brito, like Yoendrys Gomez, Clayton Beater, if he's going to be a starter at any point. I mean, we really thinned out. And given the information the Yankees had, I mean, I wish they would have understood more about the Montas injury. I think we did need a pitcher last year, and Montas working would have made the Yankees potentially an 105-win team and like a pretty solid playoff contender. And it just didn't work out. But that's what happens when you leverage 2 MLB ready players for someone like that going for a World Series. So if something goes awry and like Rodon's injury is worse, or we just get 2 guys go down after Rodon gets back, we're going to be in for some significant trouble and moves are going to have to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they will ultimately make a move. And I'm still under the opinion that Gleyber Torres or IKF or like a package of those two is going to get moved. And I think IKF for a starting pitcher makes a ton of sense. Just because it's not like he's a guy that isn't going to provide any immediate value to a team. Whoever gets him is getting a top 10 second baseman in the league. And that should warrant like a really solid 3 or 4. I think the Pablo Lopez for Torres trade last year was pretty on point for what you would expect. So it's just going to be, we're going to have to wait a little bit to see what that market develops like throughout the season, because there's going to be a bunch of things like service time, controllable years, and all that coming into factor for these teams that are going to be moving guys like sellers and buyers. So we just have to kind of wait it out, unfortunately, at the moment. And waiting is not fun because we've done a lot of that this offseason. But I think moves will come. I think the roster in general will look very different from what we're seeing it as right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of that possibility, I want to pivot into something I think is pretty reliable for this season, but we saw a really late change last year, and that's at the catching position. Last year, Kyle Higashioka was, kind of locked in, penciled in to be our number one catcher. And then uh a few days before opening day, it was after the end of spring training games, I know, we traded for Jose Trevino. And I think that's where we start with our Platinum Glove winning catcher from last year, who put on an impressive showing, even offensively behind the plate. I mean, a 250 batting average, a WRC plus of 90, which is honestly very good for a catcher, just below league average. And then his defensive prowess, you can't say enough about it. He accrued a 3.7 WAR at a below average offensive season, which goes to show you how good his framing was. I mean, nowadays to win the Platinum Glove as a catcher, you have to really blow by all the advanced analytics. And Trevino did that. How do you feel about his season coming up this year, especially offensively?
So first of all, Cashman's move to acquire him in the first place is probably the best move that he made all last season. You could argue that and Bader are the two most important ones, but just the way that he mans and commands a rotation, and not just a rotation, but also some very volatile relievers, is so impressive. I think that he's probably the most gifted, defensively speaking, catcher in the entire league. Or at least that argument can be made. The fact that other teams didn't like value him in that way just kind of baffles me, honestly. Like, I think that he could have provided so much benefit to several different teams last year. And we really lucked out the fact that Cashman was able to pull that one off. Like, you can criticize Cashman about a lot of things. That is not one. That move worked out beautifully for us. That being said, he did show regression with his bat towards the second half of last season. So I don't expect him to light it up like he did at the beginning of last year. But if we're getting a glove first guy that's able to not only command the zone, but also control the run game really well, like he did last season, his snap throws were amazing. His stolen bases, I think his stolen base caught stealing percentage went up drastically compared to previous years. So his arm strength has gotten better, or his pop time has gotten better. Either way, he's getting into a better throwing position. The dude's really good defensively, and if you can get anything around like a league average bat, I think you have to be happy with him. More than happy, actually. And also, you're going to see a lot of the best way to judge a catcher, in my opinion, is looking at the team ERA. And I think he's going to make that number glow up pretty well.
His fielding runs above average last year at the catching position, 22 runs. I mean, player value added, you're looking at it's plus like 8.5%. All these advanced stats that are really hard to quantify, and I don't really know how they do it. Or, I would be wary in taking too much out of it. But Trevino just blows every other catcher in the league defensively out of the water. Gives
Yep.
you league average bat. I mean, I think you should see a regression to a below league average bat, which is what he's been in the past. His issue is that he's not going to get on base a lot. He slaps some singles here and there. Last year he had about a 670 OPS. And for a lot of the season that was above 720, which is really good as a catcher. I think we should expect about a 650 to 670, which is where he ended up at the second half of last year, like you were saying, Jake. But I'm really confident with him. He elevates this whole staff. He makes everyone better. And we have some top talent in the rotation, and we have some people returning in the bullpen as well. I'm really excited for the work that they can do. I believe in him. I believe in Matt Blake's plan because I think they've showed that they can get the best out of these pitchers by honing in on their better pitches, and just by using good pitches in good locations, which Trevino can offer. And he can also make, while we have umpires behind the plate, he can definitely make our pitchers look a lot better. And the metrics track that, and the eye test tracks that as well.
Even in spring training games, he was framing pitches that I was like, that's not a strike, but he's getting the call. Like I love the high ones that he does. Obviously, the low one is so natural just because you're coming back up to the ball. You're bringing the ball up in the zone. He's like really good at just swatting down and like subtly moving his wrist. So that way it's like such a teeny tiny little microscopic move that a lot of catchers cannot pull off. That's very impressive to me. So I don't know, working with guys like, especially Carlos Rodon for the first time, I think that is going to be a matchup that you have to watch every single time they work with each other in that battery.
I'm excited for that. That seems like a really good battery. Um, just like fiery,
Yeah.
like really, they're like both like real big winners. Also, Radon, um, is someone in a very different way than Cole. Cole is such a nerd. Radon is very much someone who you can see is intent on perfecting his craft, even between innings, even in bullpen sessions. It's been very interesting to watch, and I think that's a good attitude that Trevi kind of brings around the entire team. Like not just Cole, Trevi kind of brings like that cool energy and that very
Yeah.
professional approach to everybody.
Oh
And
man.
he's controversially, I joke, starting over Team USA catcher Kyle Higashioka, um, who, funny enough, is the longest tenured Yankee in the Yankees organization, drafted by the Yankees in the seventh round of the 2008 MLB draft out of high school. Higgy has been with the Yankees for 15 years, and he's
Holy
been the backup catcher for just about the last since 2018. I'll give him. I mean, he was even the third string from 2018 to 2019.
yeah.
Um, how do you feel about Higgy this year, our backup catcher, and his role mixing up with Trevino and with the staff?
I think we both looked at each other early on when Ben Rortvedt was still healthy, and we said, "Wow, this is a bold move of him to go to USA. Just work on the WBC, just because there is now apparently this young, healthy Studley defensive first catcher who's a lefty that could potentially have some pop coming up, who's for the first time able to wear a Yankees like uniform on the field, show his face. First place while this kid was up and coming. I think was a bold strategy just because he didn't know like that automatically gives a new catcher more looks and more reps. And not only was it Ben Rortvedt, but you also have Austin Wells, who was really aching to get some starting reps at catcher and come up this season. His bat is ready. We've always known that. Austin Wells was pretty much set to hit the roster at some point or another this season. As a catcher, we don't really know that, but he's dead set on it. So I thought it was going to be a very interesting spring training for that. And then within a week, both Rortvedt and Austin Wells go down with their own respective injuries. And it already felt just at that point like it was fate that Higgy was once again going to man the backup position and not get traded or not have any other situation that arises where he's not on the Yankees. But here he is. I like Higgy a lot. He's a solid defensive catcher. He's one of the better ones, especially backups. I would have been very concerned if he was our starting catcher. The same way I would have been last season. I just don't think he can sustain playing 140 games a season. But he's a lot better off when he is getting his rest every 3 or 4 days and then able to relieve Trevi. So I mean, hopefully he doesn't have the same issue he had last season, just entering March and April, where he popped a ton of home runs in spring training. He didn't get to do that this year, but he popped a ton of home runs, and then it took him a whole 6 weeks, 8 weeks to hit his first one out, if that. It might have been more. Um,
I think that's why he went to the WBC.
he was like,
He
"Let me
knew he
just,
would not get any at bats,
yeah,
so he has to save his homers.
save the guns,
So he's
man,
gonna hit 12 homers in April.
save the bullets." I think that honestly, it might be a
Yeah.
solid strategy, and I don't know if he got too much in his head last year, but like he hit 7 in the entire spring training, or 10, was it? Something crazy. Um, I don't know. I think that he's just a solid, reliable backup catcher that has already a great rapport with all the pitchers and now catchers in that system. So he's gonna do his Higgy things. If he hits 10 bombs and plays 80 games, 90 games, and has like a 700-ish OPS, if that, and just continues to play solid defense, like I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, he grades out well above average defensively, not nearly as good as Trevi. I won't say a bad thing about Higgy. I think you covered everything that he's going to be. He's going to hit 12 homers. He's going to have like a 680 OPS. He's going to strike out for a month and a half and not get on base. And then he's going to hit 8 of his home runs in 2 weeks. And it's going to be great. He'll be pretty solid enough defensively. If you love Higgy like I do, go to some weekday day games, go to some Sunday day games, any day after night. Get to see him at work. So that is Kyle Higashioka, and I think that's just about everything with our backup catching situation. I mean, pretty much everyone else is injured right now or not near debuting. Maybe Josh Bro is an option in the minor leagues, but right now we're rolling with IKF as our third string catcher.
Are we big Anthony Siegler guys?
I mean, maybe. I don't see the function for him here. I mean, if we're talking like a Higgy or Trevino injury, I could see him on the roster because I don't think we're rolling with IKF as our backup catcher, or maybe we do, which that would be a fun time. Yeah. Interesting. Does Higgy or Trevino going down mean that Volpe is the first call up because IKF becomes
Oh,
the backup catcher?
I mean, considering Volpe will already be on the opening day roster, I don't know how that would work.
Oh,
Hot
that is a
take.
preview for our next positional preview, but I think for now, uh, that's all good for our starting pitchers and our catchers position profile and preview. Thanks for joining us today on Pinstripe Pulse. Again, follow us on Instagram at Pinstripe Pulse Pod, on Twitter at Pinstripe_Pulse. Also share with your friends. And if you're listening and watching, like and subscribe. We could use all of that. We appreciate all of you who watch, sometimes the hundreds of you, sometimes the thousands and thousands of you. It's really nice to see and hear that you guys are here with us. We'll be giving you a lot of content throughout the season, and some more positional profiles. So if you want some spicy infield and outfield talk, listen to our next episode and go back and listen to our bullpen preview or our episodes with June Lee, or the WBC. But until then, Jake, thanks very much.
Yeah, appreciate it, Liam.
See you guys.
Later.